Orange pill. Orange pill. Orange pill.
Orange pill. Oh, give me a pill where the fiat don't roam and the bankers hide all day long. I just want my individual sovereignty, and I'm sick of these central banks, and I love my Orange Pill podcast all day.
Casa on the range.
Where the orange pills run free.
You know what?
What?
We are so huge in Mexico.
Yeah.
I want to go down there and start a cult for real. And this is going to be the masthead of our cult place of worship, the place of the orange pill worship. Here's some artwork from MexicanCryptoArt.wordpress.com. And apparently it's from a 10-year-old girl. And she's very talented. There is Max Keiser.
That's really cool. It really captures our Mexican orange pill audience. There's me in a blazer with orange pills on it, with the Bitcoin logo, and I've got that Mexican kind of skull for a head type of thing. And it looks great. It reminds me of when we were in Cartagena, Colombia, and I went to a fashion store there, and they had this brilliant blue and yellow jacket that looked cool. It had these yellow circles on it and stuff. And, the fashion side of this business is really ready to take off. I think the Max and Stacy orange pill fashion line would do well.
I think so too. We need a lifestyle brand. Anybody out there who wants to start running our lifestyle brand? Because Max and I have a lot of fashion and a lot of lifestyle brandishness to us. But, the whole part of time, we don't have much time is the problem. And, we have Sats, Margs, and Orange Pill.
Yeah, we'll design everything. You create the store, the online store, and we'll figure out a split. And you too can be a fashion mogul.
Right. I want to say that I hope you like my shirt. This is my I Love Rock shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Don't, get your mind out of the gutter. It says rock.
Uh-huh.
It says rock.
Uh-huh.
Rock. I love rock.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right. And I do want to remind you, first of all, before, so I could take another sip of my margarita made in the genuine Mexican way, just tequila and Cointreau and some lime.
It's genuine.
It's genuine.
Genuine.
I do want to quickly throw to this ad from our sponsor, thesunexchange.com/orange pill.
Sun Exchange is the world's first peer-to-peer solar leasing platform. Earn Bitcoin solar power in communities in Africa and be part of the new world economy. Visit thesunexchange.com/orange pill and start monetizing sunshine today.
Right. It's important that we all remember to go visit them. They have a new project up. And you know what? I got an email from them saying, I didn't see that it had said Sun Exchange is place is open in this retirement community. And I thought a retirement community was being targeted by one for
I'm seeing more of those every day myself, having trouble walking, need a retirement villa escape, want to go on a cruise forever.
Right. You tweeted this story.
What?
You tweeted that photo of you, that MexicanCryptoArt.wordpress.com.
Yeah, what about it?
And you had tweeted, Jamie Dimon, someone here to see you.
Yeah.
Now, this is really important, is that Max and I have been telling you and warning you about Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan. We've been warning about JP Morgan for years. We've told you how they were manipulating precious metals markets, for example, and that's why you should get off zero. Get off zero. That's an image of Michael Saylor with,
King Mike Saylor.
and outer space cat eyes, And we've been warning you, this is part of the reason why we even came to Bitcoin was because of Jamie Dimon. If it weren't for Jamie Dimon, and that's what one should always consider, your nemesis, the evil guy, the Satan, the bad dude, like they often drive you to goodness. Like you don't want to be like them, so you end up being driven to goodness. We got driven to Bitcoin because of Jamie Dimon, because of JP Morgan. It came straight out of that whole, crash.
Straight out of Wall Street.
Straight out of, yeah.
You got the yin and the yang.
So we've been warning about them for a long time. And, they just were found, well, they weren't found guilty. Basically, they got to pay a small fine and get out of a RICO case that the Department of Justice was building against them. And this is why I want to tell you, because, censorship right now is really huge in the news. We've seen this in the past week with this story about Hunter Biden and corruption. And you know what? Both parties, the entire political system here is corrupt. All fiat systems get corrupt. And so power corrupts in many cases. And here we have a situation of corruption. But, Twitter and Facebook decided to ban any conversation, the freedom of assembly, the freedom of association, the freedom of sharing stories, and freedom of press.
Jack might as well just pissed on the Constitution.
That's right. That's right. And so, we have this censorship of the preventing certain voices from spreading. And I do want to say, New York Post, everybody says, it's a trash newspaper. Madge Weinstein and your boy talk with her. Sorry. She's butch, but let's see, so the fact is, actually New York Post has that journalist, opinion writer, who has been really hard on naked short selling and on JP Morgan over the years as well about precious metals manipulation. So they have been getting out information. But I want to show you why it's so important to be able to, have many opportunities, many options, a huge diversity of opinion, even fake news or bad opinion. Because here's a headline that shows you that the exact opposite of Keiser report, Max and Stacy, all of our content throughout the years. Washington Post, right? So this means I won't get deplatformed because Washington Post is resistance. They're, the good guys. We're allowed to say that we're allowed to share them on Twitter and Facebook. MSNBC's Stephanie Rule filmed promotional spots for JP Morgan Chase, one of the banks she covers, as a journalist. So this woman, Stephanie Rule of MSNBC, did she's promoting online on her own time, off of MSNBC's time. She's promoting a new JP Morgan Chase online series called Chase Chats, their webcast. Now, the important part is that she has to cover this on MSNBC. And in particular, they note, this article in the Washington Post notes that in Rule's case, the questions of her, if there's a conflict of interest, is more than theoretical. In August, the MSNBC host conducted a lengthy interview on the network that Chase's chief executive, Jamie Dimon, about JP Morgan Chase's initiative to hire minority workers. So I want to throw this to you, Max. I want to say, Alan Greenspan famously, and you talk about this all the time, Alan Greenspan said, we're willing as regulators, as central bankers, to tolerate fraud from the likes of JP Morgan in order that there is liquidity in the markets. Here, this is what you see with a lot of the media, especially the progressive media, is like, these people are willing to not cover JP Morgan's fraud. And Google it, MSNBC, Google MSNBC, JP Morgan, precious metals manipulation. They never covered that story, but they're willing to overlook that in exchange where Jamie Dimon is going to hire some minority, like women, Black, Hispanic. He's going to hire some minority hires. And isn't he a good guy? And isn't that worth the crime if he's going to use those crime proceeds to hire some minorities?
Right. Well, it's triply negative for people living in the United States. And let me explain why. So we do our show and people say, hey, you know what? I hear what you're saying and it sounds terrible, but I don't hear it anywhere else. I watch MSNBC for whatever reason, but they don't seem to cover the stories that you're covering. So, I hear what you're saying, but I need some secondary or tertiary, confirmation from other news sources. I'm just not getting it. So that's step number one. Step number two, and let's call that you're in a designed bubble where you're not getting information. So that's step number one. Step number two, okay, you're Jamie Dimon. You are a recidivist, law-breaking, market manipulator, and accounting fraud perpetrator that has a business model of keeping 75 cents of every dollar you steal. That's now been worked out. We figured out the numbers. And they paid $35 billion in fines, but they kept, let's call it $100 to $120 billion in the money that they stole. And that's their business model. And so if you want to make sure you get good coverage, what do? You hire the journalists to do puff pieces about how you're such a great person. And now you've compromised the media. So they're bought. They own the media. Jamie Dimon owns MSNBC, and they're going to report favorably on him. So now, so far, you and the audience are thinking, well, that's all fine and good. The world's corrupt. I don't really care. I'm cynical. Here's where it hurts. As a result of the marginalization of what we've been saying, you here in America, you did not hear about Bitcoin at $1 or $10 or $100 the way Mexico did, Asia did, all of Europe did, and 100 million people who watch our show did. And we created hundreds of thousands of millionaires, Bitcoin millionaires all over the world, but hardly any in America because of this censorship. And so you may think this doesn't impact you, the fact that you're not getting the information, but guess what? You're poor now because you allowed your government and your bankers to impoverish you by a lack of information. Ha, 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 ha.
So I want to also say, I was going to cover more of this Twitter censorship story, but what I'm going to do is, what we're going to do on Orange Pill Podcast is we're going to cover it next week because we're going to talk to Michael Krieger next week. Today, we're talking to Robert Breedlove, and that's coming up in a few moments here. And it's an amazing interview. We already did the interview. It's so good. But I want to say in terms of that, just look at us. Here we are, Orange Pill. Max and I have made thousands of different content in dozens of different formats across the years since, almost 18 years now. And what I'll say is we really genuinely, totally encourage you to go watch MSNBC, go watch their interview with Jamie Dimon, absorb that information, look at that information. You know why? Because I'm confident that after watching us and then you go watch them, you'll see the superiority of our coverage, right? I am totally 100% confident. MSNBC doesn't want you to see us. They don't want you to be able to watch us. They want us deplatformed. They're trying to get us deplatformed. They're pushing their friends, Jamie Dimon, to push legislators to deplatform us. So why don't they want you to watch us? And that's part of what's going on is this elite messaging failure, the crisis of confidence in the elite, that they don't believe in their own message. They know they're authoritarian. They know they have fascist tendencies now. And they know, and that fascism arises out of hypocrisy, as Hannah Arendt would say. And it also arises out of their crisis of confidence. They don't believe this shit they're saying. They don't operate in their own lives according to what they force everybody else to do.
Absolutely correct on all points. I couldn't agree more. And as a result, there's an information arbitrage between what we do and what mainstream media in America does. And that arbitrage is worth literally $200 and something billion worth of wealth, compounding at a magnificent rate per day, and either get with it and achieve individual sovereignty or listen to Rachel Maddow all day and be a dependent of the mainstream media and the central banks, you, your family, your offspring, your grandchildren out there with the begging bowl every day. Please give me my daily scraps, Rachel and Jamie. Please, I want my scraps today. Boy, you dumb.
Well, okay, let's go to a conversation we had with Robert Breedlove, and it's genuinely mind-blowing. It blows time, right? Time is coming out of Robert Breedlove's brain.
What? I gotta watch this again. Hey, time now to turn to Robert Breedlove. He is a freedom maximalist. He's the CEO of Parallax Digital, and he's an advisor at swanbitcoin.com. Michael Saylor of MicroStrategy fame recently said of Robert Breedlove that Robert Breedlove is consciousness expanding. And of course, that's what we're all about here at the Orange Pill Podcast. We are expanding consciousness. So this should be a good interview.
Right. Robert Breedlove, welcome to Orange Pill.
Thank you, Stacy, and thank you, Max, for having me.
Right. You know, a few years ago, Mark Yusko of Morgan Creek popularized the notion of get off zero.
As my shirt says, with a depiction of Michael Saylor there and a crown there. Yeah.
Right.
The king himself. It's an awesome shirt.
Yeah. He's become the king of Bitcoin at the moment. And now the corporate treasuries in 2020 are doing exactly that. They're getting off zero. So I want to first go back to an epic piece that you wrote that really launched you into the, consciousness, deep into the consciousness of Bitcoin this year. And that was that you wrote the number zero and Bitcoin. So I want to first lay out to the audience this notion of zero and Bitcoin. You wrote, and I think this was the paragraph that really sets this conversation up, is many believe that Bitcoin is just one of thousands of crypto assets. This is true in the same way that the number zero is just one of an infinite series of numbers. In reality, Bitcoin is special, and so is zero. Each is an invention which led to a discovery that fundamentally reshaped its overarching system. For Bitcoin, that system is money, and for zero, it is mathematics. Since money and math are mankind's two universal languages, both Bitcoin and zero are critical constructs for civilization. Elaborate on this notion of zero and how important and how Bitcoin relates to that.
That's quite the elaboration indeed. And I think the piece is like 40 minutes of reading about that specific topic. But in general, the impetus for me to write this was trying to answer that somewhat difficult question: is what makes Bitcoin different than all the other crypto assets, the whole jungle of alternative crypto assets, endearingly referred to as shitcoins by some, specifically in the Bitcoin community. Yeah. And it's not an easy question to answer, because what underpins Bitcoin's difference are some unique concepts like path dependence, which is something I got from Taleb, and the fact that money has this centripetal network effect. It tends towards one. And the way that I describe that is that since money is a single purpose technology, it's just used to facilitate trade or move value through time and space, that its value is supported by its liquidity and network effects. So basically the biggest money tends to win. And the historical example of that is gold, clearly, right? Gold, and to gloss over a lot of history, of the 5 properties that make money, metals were best, which are divisibility, durability, recognizability, portability. And then the 5th quality, which is very important, is scarcity. And gold exhibited the highest scarcity profile of any of the monetary metals. So it won out. It became universal money. And I argue that for those same quantifiable reasons that we only have one analog gold, we're only likely to ever have one digital gold. And Bitcoin, as being the first mover, it had time to grow organically. And if you were to launch a competitive crypto asset today, it doesn't benefit from that same unique period where there was no nation state attack on Bitcoin directly initially, right? And then to add on to that too, Bitcoin, it's basically perfected all 5 properties of money. So there's not really any room or design space left for a competitor to come in and disrupt Bitcoin, so far as we can tell based on history. And I guess I was looking for the historical analogy of what is something comparable, a comparably unstoppable idea, something that emerged in real time historically that basically couldn't be stopped because it was such a profound and uniquely useful idea. And I landed on the discovery of zero. You could argue that it's a discovery or an invention. It depends whether you think numbers are part of latent reality or numbers are just a symbolic representation of across a number of categories. But I think the parallels are pretty interesting. Zero was resisted by a lot of jurisdictions. It was considered heretical by the church because it implied the concept of both the void and infinity, which didn't fit into the Aristotelian model of the universe, which was strictly finite. And it was because of its utility that it outcompeted all the other numeral systems. And it got us into the domain of the imaginary numbers and calculus, all these fundamental systems that underpin modernity as we know it today, right? The wireless technologies we're using today are critically dependent on imaginary numbers. So they're not just these silly abstractions, they have a lot of utility. And I think Bitcoin is that. I argue that Bitcoin as an invention represents the discovery of absolute scarcity for money. Like it can only happen once. So you could say it's kind of like the invention of the number zero is similar to the discovery of the 0% terminal inflation rate money we call Bitcoin. And then as a real world example of how it can't be disrupted, I look at Bitcoin Cash, which was launched with the same properties as Bitcoin, but because it has smaller network effects, smaller liquidity, it's collapsed in value against Bitcoin since the fork. So I think that Bitcoin really does represent this one-time discovery of absolutely scarce money that we'll never see again for the rest of history.
Right. No, I like this. Also, the setup with the invention of zero, the discovery of zero versus the church or the orthodoxy of the time, because it implies the void and infinity, and it overturned value systems and a shift in consciousness. And I think this word consciousness comes into play a few times in talking about your work. And so with Bitcoin, and you touched on it, is the introduction of an absolutely scarce commodity that is used as money. And the existing orthodoxy, the central banks of the world, the new priests of the world, are freaking out about this. And they're not sure what to do about it. And so do you think that, what's the outcome there? Because there's ultimately, if we use the church versus the number zero triumphed. And the church, we went into the Enlightenment, and the church effectively lost a tremendous amount of influence and power. So can we expect the same outcome for the current priesthood that occupies the central banks, Robert?
Yeah, I believe Bitcoin does make the state much less relevant in the long run. And under the state, I would put central banking and government. They're very much in bed together, as we all know. And their entire worldview is premised on the exact opposite of what Bitcoin represents, right? They don't have absolutely scarce money. They have purely unscarce money. We literally just print money every time there's any problem in the economy. And the inception of central banking, I'm very confident, was like referring back to the creature from Jekyll Island that's talking about the inception of the Fed. The people that implemented central banking understood what they were doing. They knew that this was a mechanism of theft, that they could basically use it to steal from society at will in a unilateral and very invisible fashion forever. Getting to today, a lot of people argue with me that central bankers don't have this intention of malevolence, that they're actually trying to help economies by printing money, and they think they're doing the right thing. I'm not sure. I don't know if Jerome Powell believes the lies he's spitting when he's saying that monetary policy and wealth inequality are unrelated. I mean, it's a flat out lie objectively. I don't know if he actually believes it or not. But I do think that for hundreds of years, it's been a philosophical debate between Keynesian economics and Austrian economics. And Keynesian economics is, what I would argue, is very propagandistic. It's new. It doesn't have a lot of first principles rooting, whereas Austrian economics represents the sum total of knowledge of humanity, basically in the sphere of economics, up through the current day. And historically, that was just a philosophical debate, and that's all it was. But with the introduction of Bitcoin, we've actually taken this debate into the pragmatic sphere, where we see Austrian economic money competing with Keynesian financial system in real time. And the verdict to date in the first 11 some odd years of Bitcoin's history is that it's the best performing asset in history. And in fact, it sort of operates as this insurance policy on central banking, such as the more money they print, the more valuable it becomes. And what gold was before they cornered the market and heavily manipulated its price, Bitcoin has become this true barometer of the failure of central banking and the state. And I do think that the ultimate outcome is that they capitulate and they own Bitcoin, because there's no other choice. Like as it continues to succeed, their only fiduciarily responsible move is to hold a position on the Bitcoin network as an insurance policy against its success. And every time one central bank or one nation state or one sovereign wealth fund decides to do this, they're actually incentivizing others to do so even more. So Bitcoin's game theory just functions as this unstoppable gravity well.
Right, and so you mentioned something interesting there. The Austrian economic school was somewhat theoretical, and now with the existence of Bitcoin, it has now become the practical. And in that vein, Hayek, there's a famous video that circulates on Bitcoin Twitter of Hayek saying that, well, ultimately you need to take money away from governments, but he doesn't see that happening unless it's some quirky accident. And here we have Bitcoin, which many would consider to be somewhat of a quirky accident or not, but it is definitely was totally ignored by government planners for years while it established a beachhead. But does that, so would that fulfill what Hayek was looking for, do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's the same quote that he said, unless we find a sly roundabout way to take it away from government. But that's essentially what it is. It's the United States has been the most successful economic model in history because we embraced free market capitalism, right? We maximized the sovereignty of the individual, and that has worked really well. But the one place we never let go of the reins or let go of control is in the sphere of money. We've never had capitalistic money in the world. So Bitcoin does, we have to get into central banking a bit. Central banking is straight out of Marx's playbook, right? It's the fifth measure in the manifesto of the Communist Party from 1848. So it is purely socialistic. So anytime people, which is silly today, that there's so much vitriol spewed at capitalism, and it's blamed for many problems in the world. But the truth is, we've never had true capitalism because money is one half of every transaction, and money has always been socialized throughout history. The rules of money have always been bent to favor the few at the expense of the many. And now Bitcoin represents the first set of unbendable rules, if you will, in the market for money. And it forces us and incentivizes us to be honest and compete and provide service to society to earn value, right? Versus getting close to the fiat currency spigot and steal value. So it's a major shift. It shifts I argue in another piece, our social morality more towards work and away from theft. And if you look at the website I always love to point to is WTFHappened1971.com, there have been widespread socioeconomic consequences ever since we came off the gold standard in 71. And my hope and the reason I consider Bitcoin to be my life's work is that we'll return to this operating model of honesty, accountability, and integrity in the world economy.
Well, let's go deeper into these shifting values. And, as you mentioned, in the day of zero and also in the day of the Renaissance and Enlightenment, it was expansion of consciousness in the individual that undermined the faith and the authority of many institutions, whether it was the Catholic Church or the sun god, the sun king of France, the royalty and divine nature of kings. But, I want to ask about time value and the value of time, because you do seem to have it blowing out of your mind there, right above you, the time clock, right? And I want to ask you about this time preference and the shift in time preference and what what Bitcoin has done to the community, the Bitcoiner community, and now corporations getting involved, moving their treasuries over to Bitcoin. Because, Max and I have been around in Bitcoin since 2011, and we've seen the shifting of consciousness since, the early days when most people in the Bitcoin space, maybe Hal Finney was the exception, was that, everybody thought it was a payments rail and we're going to compete with Visa and MasterCard and PayPal. And then all of our collective consciousness, and I believe it was kind of as a collective, like us all talking to each other and Bitcoin talking to us. And what happened eventually is it all dawned on us that, well, this was even bigger than gold. This is more of a, way bigger than a payments system. So what is your view on Bitcoin's role in actually shifting consciousness in fact?
Great, deep question. I'd like to first maybe jump into the time preference concept, which I agree with safety. I think that is the fulcrum of civilization, right? The lower our time preference becomes, the more civilized we become. The more we move away from animal and towards man, I think. And a lot of this goes really deep, right? You could even argue that the fall of man in the Bible, or Adam and Eve's emergence into consciousness, is kind of like the discovery of time, right? They discovered that not only do they need to work and satisfy their needs today, but they're going to have to do this every day forever. And so we always need to work and prepare for the future. And that's something that distinguishes us from animal, right? Most animals are just going about their business day to day. And I think that one interesting way to look at it is that we think each one of us is an individual. Like, I'm Robert, you're Stacy, you're Max, and you have to trade with other people, right, in the world. But what's actually true, I think, is that we change moment to moment. So like each version of me now is different than the version of me now, and like an infinite series of me, right? And the concept of time preference becomes super relevant when you consider that you're doing most of your trades in life with all those little slices of yourself across time, right? So if I choose to hold money today, I'm foregoing the opportunity cost that it could use to buy me in the market to save it for tomorrow. And it's through those decisions that you either improve your position in life or make your position in life worse. And this is not just financial, right? This is fitness. If you choose to exercise today and sacrifice, you're healthier tomorrow. If you choose to eat healthy today and sacrifice the Twinkies, you'll be healthier tomorrow. You choose to read books today, you're smarter tomorrow. All these things. And I think that the more a civilization optimizes for a low time preference, the better off it is. And we start to see, when you look at it that way, it's not just your 7 billion trading partners on Earth now. It's this infinite series of those trading partners across time plus yourself. And then it starts to look like one almost collective organism, right? If you consider humanity as one organism trying to optimize its use of resources and expand itself, right? To expand its population. In order for us to conduct ourselves in a way that supports the success of the collective organism, humanity, we need rules and protocols that are reliable, right? That people cannot bend and twist and corrupt. Basically, we need, and the biggest protocol of all in the sphere of economics is money. So we need incorruptible money. It's like the thing that we've been searching for throughout all time. And gold did a good job for that, for Stone Age man. But as we know, central banks have monopolized and corrupted it, right? The physicality of gold led to it being centralized. And then once it was centralized, the abstractions of gold into paper currencies are what became corrupted. We haven't actually corrupted the supply of gold per se. But with Bitcoin, it's something fundamentally different. There's no need to abstract it into paper because Bitcoin gives us this universal means of final settlement, right? It's much more difficult to financialize it, to represent you have more Bitcoin than you do, because you can just sign a message to prove your balance, right? And the other thing I like to point to is the old adage that we have two certainties in life, death and taxes. I consider Bitcoin to be the third certainty, right? We have 21 million Bitcoin. It's a rule firmly established for all indications that it cannot be broken or changed. I think, again, the Bitcoin Cash fork was probably the biggest legitimate threat to that. But I would say that proves that forks are non-dilutive to Bitcoin. And we now have this immutable rule set for the collective human organism to interoperate. And that takes us to an entirely new level of wealth creation and trust, because you can't corrupt the money. When you corrupt the money, you break down trade. When you break down trade, you disrupt wealth creation. You disrupt wealth creation, you lead to conflict, right? So I think it's a monetary, socioeconomic, and philosophical paradigm that takes us to a world of much less conflict and much more cooperation.
Right. So let's talk about this collective human organism. You mentioned the Adam and Eve, the kind of the Genesis myth, if you will, and world trade that goes along with this collective human organism. We've been trading with each other around the world. And the difference between gold and other forms of money. Gold, of course, adopted a universal acceptance in terms of its weight. So an ounce was universally and globally accepted. And so it had some global appeal in that sense. Then with the invention of zero in the Middle Ages, suddenly global trade was able to synchronize various accounting methodologies, because the problem at those years was that different countries had different ways for accounting. And so trade was inhibited in a way. With the introduction of zero, suddenly there was a synchronization of accounting. And so it was highly instrumental to booming trade. Now let's flash forward to Bitcoin. It's time-based, like zero, not gold, which is based on weight. But it's interesting in that every 10 minutes, the entire ledger is audited. And so if the majority of the world trade goes onto a Bitcoin standard, that means every single 10 minutes of our existence, everything is completely proven to be either true or false. Everything related to trade. And we're saying everything related to trade is related to the global collective organism. And therefore, this extends into a pretty deep philosophical question here. Are we getting to a point where the auditing is so perfect in the Bitcoin blockchain and it happens every 10 minutes, and the synchronization of global consciousness, global trade is happening, that we are fundamentally changing even what it means, what the concept of money means?
I think it's a brilliant observation that the old thing about the six blind guys encountering the elephant. Have you heard that? Where like one guy's touching the leg, one guy's touching the trunk, tail. They're all describing it differently, but it's this big thing that we can't even get our head around, because we're all grasping for analogies here, right? It's like this, it's like that, it's like this, but it's something way bigger than we can comprehend. I think every month and year proves that out, right? It's really incredible, which makes the work very fulfilling, by the way. It's just this inexhaustible teacher and really fun to work in this space. But a couple of things you pointed to about global synchronization. It was gold. Another way to think about gold is that because its supply was the most resistant to change, that it best reflected the immutable flow of time. And as you've properly alluded to, time is at the basis of everything we do in the economy. It is what we're trading, actually, right? That's what, economics 101, you're better at making A, I'm better at making B. We're both better off by specializing in trading. So what we're doing is optimizing for time, right? You can do A faster, I can do B faster. Together, we can increase our aggregate output or productivity. And so as that happens, something necessarily becomes the most tradable, which is the thing that will hold the value of time and act as a claim on savings. So everything that we make in the world, all the capital that we create, whatever asset is most reflective of time becomes redeemable for all those assets. So it's as if gold was a clock in a way. It was the economic clock. Like we know the stock to flow ratio of time, right? This basically gets closer and closer to infinity with every moment, right? It's one moment in a stock of infinity, 13.7 billion years of the universe. So whatever stock to flow asset most closely reflected that stock to flow ratio of near infinity became money. That's what gold was. But with the invention of Bitcoin, we actually have a money with a stock to flow ratio that goes to infinity. So it's a perfect emblem, perfect reflector, or perfect emblem of time, if you will.
So in that regard, it
perfectly
becomes
reflects it.
deeply satisfying for humans, correct? And what impact will that have if suddenly everyone in the world has exposure to something that makes them very deeply satisfied?
Right. Yeah. Well, as you lower your time preference and more wealth is created in the world, your work tends to become more meaningful because you'll need to work less hours per week to satisfy your needs, and you'll have more free time to pursue things that are of interest to you, artistic or cultural, spiritual pursuits. So I think that's the big cultural impact of Bitcoin, is that right now, a lot of people are fiat slaves, whether they know it or not, right? They're punching the clock 40 hours a week. Most of them hate their job. Their kids are in daycare. They're paying for a house they're never in. And I'd say that's the vast majority, at least here in the US, that's the vast majority of people's livelihood. And that's even people that are very successful financially. And I think Bitcoin moves you to a world where that need to punch the clock 40 hours a week doing something you don't like becomes much less relevant. Because I have friends that work in investment banking. I think, Max, you worked in investment banking at one point too. People wildly successful financially, but they hate their job. They hate their life. And that is a fiat type job. Not to say that it doesn't add real value to an economy and would be a useful function, but a lot of the deals they're involved in now are things that wouldn't exist under a Bitcoin standard, I think. So it does add this element of enrichment to our lives. And another way to think about Bitcoin is, I kind of consider it the discovery of free speech in a way too. So I point in the piece to the concept of the logos, which the logos is just the principle of reason that we all have, which is our ability to evaluate our surroundings and make decisions, right? We're not robots. We're all adaptive, and we can tell and believe stories and all these things. In the 20th century, we learned very clearly that the freedom of speech is important to a functional society, that everyone needs to be able to speak their mind so that ideas can go to battle so that your bodies don't have to. Anywhere that became an aspiring dictatorship like Nazi Germany or Soviet Russia, the first thing they do is try to silence the voice of dissent, right? Because the threat to the state is poignant ideological criticism. So, and the logos, that word, it means word or ratio, right? And I point to this in the piece. So we have logos embodied in words, but we also have the logos embodied in prices, which is the economic system of telecommunication, right? Price signals, that's how the collective organism functions and reallocates resources. And central banking it's manipulating the freedom of speech of prices. So it manipulates price signals and causes misallocation of capital and all this malignancy we see related to it in the world. And I think that Bitcoin sort of represents a more perfect expression of the collective logos, such that we can actually buy and sell things based on accurate price signals. And it allows the world to harmonize better. So, for the same reason we saw the Soviet Russia collapse in the 20th century, and we saw the freedom of speech and the importance of holding the sovereignty of the individual higher than the state to keep it functional, I think we'll see the similar thing play out for prices in the 21st century, and Bitcoin's a key component to that.
Right. And, you continue to your exploration down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. You're bringing in all these disciplines of history, sociology, psychology, economics, and blending them all together in a way that I think there's a real need for it. There's a real hunger for it, because people do have a sense of anxiety about trying to make sense of things. Now, when you talk about capitalism and has not been fully expressed, And with the introduction of Bitcoin, which is an absolutely scarce unit of time and money, we have the chance to have this capitalist, low preference, almost a paradisiacal model. But, of course, anytime the mind jumps down rabbit holes, you find paradoxes. So one paradox that jumps out, I'm curious what your thoughts are. So you use the word collective often, as in the collective human organism. And the word collective, of course, is often associated with socialism. So how do you square that circle?
It's a great question. So socialism, we're getting into the territory now where I think Bitcoin actually rewrites the history books a bit. I don't even know if you necessarily call it pure capitalism. It's almost as if we're moving beyond the dichotomy between socialism and capitalism. But socialism in the 20th century is based on this notion that humans can collectively own capital to the benefit of the owners, right? That's the theory of socialism. But in practice, it's the administrators of that capital, which is the state typically, that always end up bending the rules and allocation of that capital to favor themselves at the dispossession of everyone else, right? Whereas capitalism is on the opposite end of the spectrum, that everyone is self-owned, that any value they create, that they invest their time and energy into creating, they own, and they're free to trade that with other self-owned people. And I think that paradoxically, the individual pursuit of self-interest based on an immutable rule set, right? Everyone can see the rules, they're unchanging, which are really premised on the three, I guess, two tenets of morality, which are don't kill, don't steal. And under don't kill, you could include no violence, right? We need nonviolent dispute resolution. That in my mind today, capitalism based on a money that can't be manipulated would actually create the best outcome for the collective. Now, it's been pointed out to me that is not capitalism and that we need a new term for it. Someone suggested sovereignism at one point. So maybe that's the case. I'm still trying to get my head around this.
Right, exactly. It's a paradoxical. And so if there was a Venn diagram, with capitalism on one side and socialism on the other side, what we're saying is Bitcoin occupies some overlapping of these two circles. It's not exactly clear and hasn't been defined precisely the overlapping quality to it and the details of it, but we were saying that this is kind of what it suggests. And looking back over the past 30 years, of course, the closest antecedent to the Bitcoin governance model would be with Linux and the open source model, which is a collective of volunteers, and they end up creating the majority backbone of the internet is run on Linux, not Microsoft products. So the outcome was to triumph over private, certain monopoly position with an open source project. So the open source movement was an antecedent certainly to this, because this was coordinated nodes in a synchronistic way to create a better whole. So the whole is bigger than the sum of the parts in open source. And similarly with Bitcoin, the coin is bigger than the sum of the nodes in terms of what it's doing, I suppose you could say. But we don't know. And to your point you made before, there's so much more of the mystery is yet to be revealed, I think is one of the fascinating aspects of this. There's so much more because it's changing that consciousness. As you point out, there's a global consciousness. And if it's changing, and it's changing every 10 minutes, not every century or every 1,000 years, but every 10 minutes, then the rapidness of that change is going to be breathtaking. And it can bring in almost, I mean, if you want to get ecclesiastical about it, it could bring in kind of a global epiphany, if you will, where suddenly everyone has the same insight on the same moment about the same anxiety-provoking thing that's been holding us back as a species. Is that a highfalutin, hippie, crazy, nonsensical Steve Jobs-like comment, or what do you think of that?
I think 4 or 5 years ago, it would have sounded much more crazy. But I know, I'm sure you guys have experienced this. Bitcoin from a distance is very complicated, right? But the closer you get to it, the more you study it, it becomes very obvious in a lot of ways. And I think that we're going to see that play out, right? As number go up, attention draw in, more people pay attention. There's more and more intellectual basis for exploring Bitcoin now. Like Michael Saylor got over, near the bottom of the rabbit hole in less than a year. I think he said just a couple of weeks of studying it, right? And that's because a lot of that trail has already been blazed. So I think people can accelerate into the Bitcoin rabbit hole much more quickly. And it really is just a matter of realizing the value of absolute scarcity, the value of being able to store your wealth and time and energy in an uncompromisable savings technology, and then moving your savings into Bitcoin. So this could be a sudden shift, especially given the macroeconomic backdrop. All we need are a few catastrophes or a few hyperinflation events where Bitcoin proves itself as a lifeboat, and the whole world could follow suit very quickly. We're in this unprecedented time of digital interconnectivity that things happen fast, and they're happening exponentially faster. So I know I've heard you talk about the possibility of a global hash war at some point. I think that's a distinct possibility. And from the biblical standpoint, Jesus only flipped out once in the Bible, and that was on the money changers in the temples. And that what they were doing was manipulating the weights and measures, right? They were confiscating value from people by compromising their exchange protocol. They were
Right.
the ancient central bankers.
Right. So let's follow up on that, because that's kind of the moment we're at right now today with quantitative easing and money printer go brrr. That meme like instantaneously hit the cerebral cortex of that millions and millions of humans on Earth all over, and we all understood instantly what it meant. So, we're about to hit the 50th anniversary of an all-fiat world, the U.S. dollar world. In 1971 it started, and we're hitting 2021 if we all survive these last 3 months of the year. But, do you think this fiat world is at an end? Do you think this is that sort of moment where Bitcoin is heralding in a new epoch, that not only in consciousness, but in global order?
I believe so. I don't know, who the timing is very hard to tell. If this is a 50-year event or could happen in 2, it's literally that uncertain. But my explorations into Bitcoin, I was raised Christian, but sort of agnostic in my adult life, but have come back to study Christianity in a lot of ways. And that this concept of honest weights and measures comes up a lot in the Bible. And it repeatedly says, it's an abomination to the Lord. And you can interpret the Lord, by the way, if you're not Christian, as spiritual law. That's all it means. It's like the proper law for people to adhere to interoperate. And we have just gone bonkers on dishonest weights and measures over the past 50 years, right? And we are seeing a lot of the consequences of that are basically maybe misblamed. People are blaming capitalism or blaming the president or blaming this, blaming that. But I think at the root of it is we just have dishonesty deeply integrated into our trust fabric, which is money, right? It's supposed to be the thing that is trust minimized, right? I should be able to put my savings in money and have the lowest counterparty risk, lowest inflation. It should be the safe haven of value, but it's been completely flipped over. And it's just the attack point for parasites, right? Central banks, no one wants to hold their value in fiat. Who in their right mind would just hold all dollars right now? You're getting destroyed. And I think that it almost has to work, because if it doesn't, we're doomed. I mean, socialism itself, or whatever you want to call this, anytime you're centrally manipulating a market, it only tends to get worse. It doesn't ever resolve itself and get better. Like, you have to have something that helps the market clear at an honest price Otherwise, it's just going to get more and more centralized, more and more corrupt, and dispossess more and more people until you have a social uprising. So we really need Bitcoin to work. Otherwise, macroeconomics is going to be pretty bleak.
Right. So, in keeping with this talk about the Bible and religion as such, and one of the factors one comes across is this notion of greed. And we talked already about this concept of number go up, which is the greed factor in Bitcoin. But I wanted to ask you about kind of something about this idea of greed and how Bitcoin might impact the notion of greed. I see that, for example, on sites like Etsy. Etsy is a site where people can do home crafts. And suddenly somebody, a grandma who likes to hand crochet potholders, who would be not included in the economy or considered to be not contributing to the economy, on Etsy, she's suddenly part of this collective of handcrafted contributors to this economy. And she's not driven by greed. She just loves crocheting potholders. So she's a craftsperson. Craftspeople used to be valued quite highly in our society. And then over the past 30 years, it's all financiers, financial engineers, quants, and we all went toward paper money. So if we go back to in ateliers, if we go back to craftsmen, we go back to people who are working from their heart, that all they want to do is sell enough, potholders today for my meal to eat, and I'm sublimely happy. I don't need to be greedy. With Bitcoin as the universal standard, Bitcoin standard, then that can happen a lot more readily. We've seen in the music industry, people are making a living, up until COVID-19 anyway, because of the platforms of the internet allowed folks to bypass the oligopoly of the music industry and go right to the consumer. And we created a lot of folks like that. We created YouTube stars and TikTok stars. So, and now we've got Etsy stars. Doesn't Bitcoin, in a lot of ways, solve for greed?
I think the free market itself is the best system we've developed for transmuting individual greed into collective well-being, right? But free market, again, needs these rules that can't be bent or broken. And in that sense, Bitcoin kind of is the perfect or purest expression of a free market we've ever had, right? Anyone can enter or exit. You can hold your wealth independently, right? You can be your own central bank effectively by running your node. And I think that, to the broader point, that the digital age has accelerated the free market, right? It's disintermediated a number of industries, which, when we reduce these barriers to trade, we're actually increasing wealth creation, right? So grandma's now selling things on Etsy. And then again, that allows people to do work that is meaningful to them, which I think, how else do you do good work in the world? You have to be, all in, so to speak, heart and mind and soul. So I think the digital age does get us back to this world of more artisans and independent craftsmen. And now that we have a form of capital that can be stored in a space that the state cannot monopolize, corrupt, inflate, confiscate, it really is a massive accelerant to the power of digital technology on the free market. So it's, again, if you just consider it very simply, that all we need is unhampered trade networks. That's what makes the economy go round. The digital age has given us this new domain of free market enterprise where the state can't really project its dominion as well. And I think that that's why it's been so disruptive to technologies. But Bitcoin essentially represents the highest and greatest test of the disruptive power of digital tech, because it's now disrupting gold. Gold is the most important tool in the world, right? For 5,000 years, it's the money that makes the world go round. There's never been anything even close to disrupting it. And now the digital age is, trying its hand at the most important tool in the world.
I think also we did an interview with Nozomi Hayes, who beautifully encapsulates this greed. Bitcoin really, really understands that humans are greedy. That's one of our negative, sinful traits, but it turns it and harnesses it into a positive.
Right.
And so rather than try to fight, as many religions do, it's like, you will be punished, you will go to hell, you will do all this thing. Like we've tried for thousands of years to stop human things like fear, greed, all that stuff that happens to us naturally, and found a way to harness it, saying, okay, I'm inviting you to be greedy and converting it into something really positive. And speaking of that, in the last 30 seconds here, I want to ask you, because you're doing a documentary, we're documentary makers, filmmakers, we love content creation in this whole space. You're making with American Huddle. What can you tell us about it so far?
Yeah, so it's early. We're in the ideation phase. He's got some experience in the filmmaking business as well. I do not. I'm just trying to help on the writing side and anywhere I can, the capital side too. The general premise is that we want to explain money from first principles. We want to explain how gold has influenced the course of world history, up to and including the 20th century world wars. We want to describe how gold has been corrupted by government, and then how Bitcoin fixes a lot of the problems we see in the world. So it's not maybe an original arc for a lot of Bitcoiners. It's probably the rabbit hole journey most of us have been down, more or less, reading the Bitcoin Standard and whatnot, but try to do it in a poignant film in 60 to 90 minutes. And hopefully the idea is to get it to the widest audience possible and make it as engaging as possible. Because I do consider it my moral imperative to, we've seen the light, so to speak, and now it's our aim should be to share this with as many people in the world as possible and make sure that they benefit from the movement.
That's not a clock above your head. That's a halo.
But you have certainly added value to our time, and I hope everybody in the audience enjoyed this as well, as much as we did. Thank you so much for joining Orange Pill.
Thanks, Robert.
This is great, guys. Thanks for the consciousness expanding conversation.
All right.
Super. Orange Pill Podcast.
Did you see time coming out of his brain?
Yeah, I saw the source code of my own mind playing in front of me as a hologram. And that was shocking at first, but then I remembered I need a ham sandwich.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. But, he did mention the failure of Bitcoin Cash, and this surge of get off zero that Mark Yusko is the first I know to really start that a few years ago. He was encouraging all companies, all corporations to get off zero. I get off zero Bitcoin, having Bitcoin in your treasury. And MicroStrategy was one of the very first to, he went big, he went large, right? He was like New York style. It wasn't like, I made the decision, I'm not going to do these like wimpy dollar cost averaging, I'm just going to go all in, right? So I want to look at both of those two concepts as we, Bitcoin now is...
I want to jump in here for a second.
Okay.
The thing about Michael Saylor is that he's an astronautical physicist or engineer. And you're in that business, you only have one shot to get it right. You have to land at the right place. You can't be close to it, or that could be death. So you got to put in all the work and then hit it precisely. And he obviously put in a huge amount of work. And that's why he hit it with this huge $425 million commitment. It comes from his engineering past and his do or die mentality from his discipline. That's where he comes from.
Yeah, I'm going to pull this over. Like we're like diamond and silk. Like I'm going to make sure your mic is a little bit closer over here.
It was.
Okay. So, that's right, because we watched the Apollo 11 mission film, and one thing we found out is the closest they came to death was when there was it wasn't a miscalculation, but basically the wind was faster, or there was a bump or a crevice or a rock at where they were supposed to land, and they had to zoom ahead, and it was kind of scary, right? Their whole landing. And
it's 250 miles away, and they got within like a mile. Yeah. And it's all, it's very, very tense. It's very incredible that 2 or 3 minutes before they actually land on the moon, and that recent documentary about the Apollo 11 mission is really amazing, because the pilot I'm not sure if Neil Armstrong was the primary pilot of that craft. It could have been his co-pilot. Of course, we don't know his name because he was not the first man on the moon. And but it was an intense barrage of voices in his head from mission control, from all these different systems and system this, system that. And it's like, and his heart rate went up. For an astronaut went up.
It was like 188. It was like crazy high.
Something significant, and that is not a vehicle that is something that you fly through space, right? It's like flying a brick, and so they came down and it all worked out. But it's intense,
right? So what I saw somebody mention in one of these comments is yet another treasury. This hedge fund, Stone Ridge, which manages a couple $2 billion, they invested over $100 million into Bitcoin for their treasury. I think Safety and Moose is working with them. But Bitcoin is like now being debated and discussed on corporate treasuries. Fidelity, one of the biggest brokerages in the world, one of the biggest investment banks in the world, they're advising clients to remarkably move 5% of their assets to Bitcoin. So this is the level that Bitcoin is at. And in the meantime, if you go to Roger Ver's Twitter account, he's still like, I got another little convenience store in Tokyo to accept Bitcoin Cash. And you're like, okay, buddy, you keep booking those convenience shops, and we'll go for the treasuries here.
Roger Ver took a wrong turn on the Bitcoin path back in the when he did the Bitcoin Cash hard fork. And it's crashed to almost 98% against Bitcoin, and it's going to crash another 98% against Bitcoin because, as Robert Breedlove says in the interview, what the useful part of the Bitcoin Cash was that it kind of proved that you couldn't counterfeit Bitcoin. You couldn't create a competitor with Bitcoin with a hard fork, and that Bitcoin is unique in its own right, and it's a once in a lifetime or once in a species existence event. And he goes into it in great detail, which you will. Did they already play that, or are we going to play it?
We just had broken to that, right? We had already shown that.
Had the people as you just listened to.
Max is going to get
Robert Breedlove say that, and I would reiterate what he just said, and I would add my own comment, which is that what Roger Ver missed is that on the front page of the Bitcoin white paper, the word cash is prominently used, and he thought that meant payments. And what everyone figured out 3 or 4 years ago definitively is that word means gold, a gold substitute. Had Roger Ver understood that, he would not have blown half of his net worth chasing Bitcoin Cash with Wuhan down in China, and it was a big mess.
He definitely did not blow any of his own net worth. I guarantee you Roger Ver was not stupid enough to sell his Bitcoin. His partner at Bitmain, Jihan Wu, definitely did. And that is pretty funny, right? Like you basically sold a Chinese person a counterfeit. Like it's usually the other way around.
Yeah, it is good in that way. I mean, Roger Ver is kind of the reverse situation.
We're the original Yankees. You can't out-Yankee an American.
Roger Ver gave a big trick bag to Wuhan. Who got blown out.
Woo-hoo. And we should send that. We should tweet that at the president of the United States, who has a problem with China. We should say, hey, tell them, taunt them with Roger Ver.
Send Roger Ver to China, and the whole balance of payment will flip. We'll be huge creditors within 6 months. He's proven himself.
Yeah. So zip, zap, zop. They're in our Telegram group, Orange Pill Telegram group. Hang in there. Go there. I think we have almost 4,000. As we're recording this, we have nearly 4,000 followers in that group. It's really good. Again, in this day of censorship, and as we're seeing, they're getting more and more openly active, which in a way is good if they're more transparent that, hey, this is a Washington Post, New York Times, MSNBC only zone on Twitter. Those are the only sources you're allowed to link to. You're not allowed to link to Orange Pill. You're not allowed to link to Keiser Report. You can't link to any of these other news sources or any Republican news sources, whatever. At least they're openly saying that, and that's if you're going there for Democratic convention news or party news, whatever the hell they're called. Anyway, so here's a Zip Zap Zop in our Telegram group said, forwarded a Bitcoin Magazine statement of my list of current BTC holdings for listed companies. So people are keeping track of these Bitcoin treasuries. Largest is Grayscale Trust, which I'm not sure if it's really a treasury, but it's certainly a listed product, GBTC, and that is 1,984 million. So 4.9 billion in Grayscale Trust. MicroStrategy is stock symbol MSTR is 420 million. Galaxy Digital, which is Mike Novogratz outfit, and our friend Amanda Fabiano is now head of their new mining division.
Oh, we can talk about it now?
Oh, that's a good question. I might need to delete that. And Galaxy's
yeah, I think we can.
Mike Novogratz is out. Oh, yeah. It was announced that she's over there.
Yeah, I said that ironically. I knew we could.
Oh, okay.
I thought that would like underline it and give it special urgency.
Yeah. No, I knew it for a while, but she had been at Fidelity and running.
I remember at the Crypto Springs, last Crypto Springs, she wore a silver jumpsuit and she was roller skating around the pool. And I said, that woman's going to go to Galaxy because she's already living in outer space.
She's totally outer space. And she's going to come onto Orange Pill as soon as she gets into Galaxy and is, part of the network and whatever.
Takes over Galaxy.
But they have $180 million worth on their balance sheet. Square bought $50 million, as you know. Riot Blockchain bought $11 million. Digital X, $4 million. And Cypherpunk, which is the stock symbol HODL, they have $2 million. Believe it or not, corporate FOMO has begun.
Yep.
So the corporate FOMO has begun.
As we predicted.
You don't see any of these piling into Bitcoin Cash.
As we've also predicted, because it's not secure and it's garbage, and just like all other altcoins. But I think also Coinbase, if you use the Barry Silbert model, and he says he's got 6 or 7 billion under management over there. Coinbase, I think they just released a number, something like 11 billion, 11.5 billion.
Right. Well, that's a good point too, because we were just talking about the CEOs and these corporations and their treasuries and these executives, heads of big companies.
What's missing from that list is BitPay, because I know BitPay has a corporate treasury, and I know that it does have Bitcoin, and they have added a sizable amount of Bitcoin. Tony Galippi, who we met at the Prague conference in 2011, our first Bitcoin that we ever got in a meaningful way was from Tony Galippi at BitPay, who gave us something like 800 Bitcoin in 2011 to cover our flight and hotel to go to Prague to meet up, and we became investors in BitPay. But that's how our first big chunk of Bitcoin came around. Yeah,
he wanted us to go. He reimbursed the cost. He convinced us to go and reimburse the cost at $1 a Bitcoin. So yeah, it was pretty good. But I want to turn, because I want to turn to our interview with Madge Weinstein. Max Keiser spoke to Madge Weinstein, and the issue of CEOs and how they should behave, that actually comes up. So it's a good segue to go there now.
All righty. Well, it's time now for some guy talk with the bloated lesbian herself, Madge Weinstein. Madge, nice to see you.
Oh, hi, Max. How are you? I'm wearing these lips. Do you like my new lips?
Oh, my God. Those are fantastic. They really add something to the overall look.
Well, thank you. Your wife, Stacy, she said they would improve my brand, but they're kind of hard to talk with.
Yeah, no, I get it. We have to make sacrifices, right, for the audience.
I can't imagine. Can you imagine going to plastic surgery and having these duck lips for your whole life, like some of these ladies do in Miami and that sort of thing? I can't.
No, I don't know, but are flounder lips still in style? I know they were a few years ago.
Yeah, what happens is they all go to the same plastic surgeon. So you see all these ladies with the same lips. You see the same clown face. You see the same duck lips because they go to the same surgeon. I myself prefer natural beauty, Max.
Yes, well, you do a good job in it. And, with the right accessories and the right gown, the right dress, it goes a long way. And you have to have confidence. You have confidence in yourself. That's always the most appealing thing in anybody. Now, we got to pick your brain on what's happening here in the culture wars and the social wars. You are, of course, a bloated lesbian, which means the political pandering is coming in hard and fast in the final weeks of the general election. Your thoughts on the latest Orwellian story of, quote, sexual preference being deemed on a whim to be offensive in order to score political points against a Supreme Court nominee. And then the story gets crazier from there. What is your initial take on this?
Well, Max, to be honest, and I have to be because I'm a lesbian and we're generally an honest group of people, I didn't know the word sexual preference was offensive. And I spend a lot of time with other lesbians, munching box and whatnot. I had no idea that that was wrong until that nice senator from, I guess it was Hawaii, informed me. I really had no idea. I had to think about it. I'm like, sexual preference is wrong because I guess the word preference, because it implies that it's not natural. You know, Max, I can't stand this Coney Barrett lady. I think it was awful. I think the whole process is hypocritical and it's causing an arms race of jurors. But this is not how you go about stopping a juror, by inventing some new term that's suddenly wrong and you don't even tell the bloated lesbian podcaster about it. I didn't get the memo, Max.
Right. The story gets even more bizarre because within 12 hours of this this event happening during the Supreme Court nominee hearings, Webster's dictionary had suddenly labeled the term from being somewhat nebulous to being, quote, offensive. That happened just 12 hours after this interchange happened during the Senate hearings. That sounds to me like we've gone over the tipping point here. This is truly Orwellian in a lot of ways. Did that shock you a bit?
Well, I didn't know about that till now. That's insane, Max. I don't get it. But more importantly, I don't understand how that helps the cause. I mean, I would like this person to stop. I would like to stop her. I don't think she belongs on the bench. I think that it's really unfair how this process worked and how this has turned into some sort of a revisionist language Orwellian story is beyond me. How does that help the cause? I don't get it. I don't understand what's happening here. That doesn't even make sense to me.
Right. Well, it seems like it's not even about the supposed topic about sexual preference or sexual orientation. It seems like a witch hunt, and they brought in every possible facet that they can to prosecute, and it's a political prosecution or persecution suddenly, and it's a witch hunt. You know, during the witch hunts, from what I gather. They'd go in and they'd say, well, a few hours ago, nobody thought about the word rose, but we've just decided that you use the word rose and therefore it's taboo and you're a witch and we're going to kill you. It's that level kind of craziness.
It's stupid. And if we're going to be stupid, I'd rather focus on the fact that Amy Coney Barrett has the voice of one of those annoying people at a restaurant. She is somebody that if I was sitting next to her at a restaurant, I would say, can I please move? This woman's voice is so annoying to me. She sounds like she's just about to complain that there's too much miso in the miso soup. I don't get it. I mean, if we're going to get stupid, let's go there. Let's get real stupid. Because that's stupid.
Well, right. So this is happening, of course, right on the eve of the election. And, we've been into the podcasting for Racket for a long time, really going back to the early 2000s. And it seems that at the time it was a way to do alternative media and get rid of the, take a step back from the mainstream media and do some interesting things. But the tentacles of censorship are now filtering down into alternative media and things like Twitter and things like this nature. And this has become very chilling for speech, all speech. And what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm really glad that you brought that up and you had Adam Curry on a week or two ago. And the thing is, Max, I have a friend, Tim, and he has a podcast called Radio Clash. He's been doing it for 14 years or so. He was just canceled from the Apple podcast directory. Now, as you know, if you're canceled from Apple Podcasts, that's pretty much all the directories copy that. So you're pretty much canceled, period. They didn't even give him an explanation. They just said, you've been removed, and that's it. I mean, it's so wrong. And I remember when Alex Jones got canceled in the same way, people who listened to my own fans were defending Apple for doing that. I said, no, you don't understand. You may not like Alex Jones. I don't like Alex Jones. But to just so blithely say, I don't know if blithely's the right word. I keep thinking of Blythe Masters. You're one of your favorite people. I'm sorry, Max. But the thing is to be so glib. Maybe glib's a better word about just saying, no, it's wrong. We don't like him, so get him off. You don't understand. You got to think about the ramifications of these things. And that was a slippery slope. And now Tim, who has this wonderful show where they do mashups, is gone and he's lost his livelihood because of it, because Apple just decides on a whim, because they're the tech police now. I warned about that in 2005 when I went to VloggerCon, the first VloggerCon in New York, 2005, and all these people were talking about, oh, isn't it great? We need everybody to show our videos, and everybody's going to play these podcasts. Isn't it going to be wonderful? I said, yes, but watch out for something, because we cannot let the geeks become the art police. And that's what we have now. Tim Cook, with that outfit, is going to police art? Are you kidding me, Max? He wears the same jeans every day and those high-waisted pants. I mean, at least Phil Schiller's gone with that bloated stomach and those loose, button-up T-shirts. I don't want those people policing my art, Max.
No,
It's
high-waisted
ridiculous.
pants are a crime against fashion. I totally agree with you there.
Absolutely.
And no CEO should be caught dead wearing high-waisted pants.
No, it's
the only
terrible.
thing would be worse is to add suspenders to your high-waisted pants with a belt, and then we know all is lost. But,
Horrible.
what's amazing here is that what you're describing is censorship, and it's McCarthyism. We've had a bout of McCarthyism during that period, the witch hunts that went on during the anti-red communist hysteria back in the 50s. And here we are once again in a similar period. And during the Supreme Court hearings for nomination for Amy Barrett, instead of talking about something like that of substance, they've decided to weigh how many angels can dance on the head of a pin in terms of trying to figure out how to parse and splice and redefine a word like preference versus orientation. That seems like a total distraction, a total waste of time, meaningless, while there are actually real issues to discuss. So what kind of problem is this? Is this a failure of government, a failure? Where is the failure in all of this?
That's a good question. I really don't know. I think it's a failure of thought, and it's just, I think what it comes down to is the fact that Twitter likes are capital now. Every like you have is worth money. If you have 100,000 followers, that's worth a certain amount of capital. That's valuable. And what people do is they want to get more capital, so they need to get more likes. In order to get likes, you got to find something stupid to bitch about that nobody else has bitched about. So you find a famous person, you say, oh, they said this word wrong. I better complain about it. And then I got more likes, which translates to more money. And then I can advertise, you can advertise these lips. I mean, why do you think I bought these lips? Because some stupid influencer showed them to me on Instagram, and I had to have them because my facial muscles are very, very weak. That's what happens. I think it's really all comes from this need for social media capital. Everybody's desperate for attention, so they think of some dumb thing to say, and they don't think of the implications of it, because all that matters is money. And everybody's desperate for healthcare, because if you don't have any healthcare, you're just gonna be desperate for healthcare. So everybody's just crazy for money in America. Like, I need healthcare. Oh, let me just find something stupid to hate on, and maybe I can get enough fans so I can afford an ACA policy, because God knows we're not going to get Medicare for all, because that's socialist. The whole world's gone cuckoo, Max. I don't know what to make of it at all.
They prefer engagement without thought. They just want engagement. They just want titillation. Now, as a bloated lesbian, I mean, you well know the whole titillation market, as it were. You're a poster child for this group of bloated lesbians.
Oh, sure.
And, bloated lesbians from around the world tune into your podcast. And I have to ask you, I mean, do you focus more on the titillating factor of your looks and that kind of uber sexuality that you project? Or do you try to, be informative and newsworthy and do your job, let's say, as a correspondence of the real?
Well, I'm a correspondent. And what I like to do is, for me, the ultimate judge of my podcast is me. I don't have to please the audience because my audience is tiny. I do the podcast that I can listen to. If I can listen to my own show, I know it's successful. If I can listen to it twice, I know it's really good. But I can't go by fans. So I don't have to adjust my content for fans like a lot of big media does. Lately, I do I do podcasts while I'm in the bath, because this new iPhone, it's water resistant, Max. And I can take a bath and I play with my vagina. I play with my vagina in the bath, and I talk to my fans. And they love it. And then I talk politics sometimes when I want to. And that's just me. For me, it's about establishing a relationship with the audience.
Oh,
The
yeah, you're
audience is
definitely
my
establishing a relationship if you're in the bath playing with your vagina while doing a podcast. That goes beyond multitasking. I think we got to come up with a new term for that. But I mean, you've always been a trendsetter and pushing the edge of this industry. And I like the fact that you shoot to have a tiny audience. That's so different than most
Wow.
people out there. And as a result, the quality can't be beat. You know, I've been listening to your
Thank you.
podcast for 10 years. I remember in Paris, I threw out my back and I was immobile for a week. And I listened to nothing but the Bloated Lesbian podcast for a week. And I tell you, it's very entertaining, and I enjoyed
And
it.
I scared you up, and you got up.
It cured
You
me.
was like,
It had the power of cure. I was cured, and I got up, and I went out into the street, and I was cured. Now, this just in, late breaking news. You know, talking
no.
about what this censorship that's going on. So apparently, Twitter just banned any links to the New York Post, and the New York Post has a breaking story today about Hunter Biden
yeah, I
and
saw that.
some late breaking news. Now, Twitter is now censored. They've banned the New York Post. Remember, we started this whole process with banning Alex Jones. Okay. Alex
Yes.
Jones is a quote conspiracy theorist, and he is, very entertaining, and he rattles a lot of cages, and they banned and they censored Alex Jones. And you and I and others said, well, the problem here is once they ban one person, they're not going to stop. Here they're banning and censoring the New York Post, right?
It's ridiculous.
So what does this mean, Madge?
I don't know how I'm going to find out about obese people, and how they have COVID. I really don't. They have such. New York Post has hilarious stories. I've never once taken them oh, this is real news. I use it for entertainment, but Twitter has no right to. Well, maybe they technically have a right. I don't know about that shit, but they really have no business taking that pleasure away from me. I think I'm a little torn because Twitter is the only platform that has never censored me. I always felt like Jack Dorsey, maybe he likes me a little. I've always thought he was rather attractive for a penis bearer, but I don't understand where they're going with this. It's really just sad. I'm against censorship, Max. I mean, I think everybody has a line. My line is probably with Nazis. I think it does get difficult to talk about free speech sometimes, but my line is way below that. I don't think the New York Post should be censored. I don't think Alex Jones should be censored. And nobody's convinced me even that QAnon should be censored. And I do feel that they're very dangerous.
Yeah, but look, New York Post is part of the Murdoch media empire. The Murdoch empire, a News Corps, 20th Century Fox, the movie studio, several publications in the UK, Australia. It's a multi-billion-dollar corporation that Twitter, another multi-million-dollar publication, just declared war on a fellow media company. And now this is seeming like it gets out of hand. Forget about the U.S. getting into battle with other countries. What about this media civil wars? And I'll just wrap it up. Madge, where can people catch your podcast?
Oh, you just go to yeastradio.com. I'm all over I haven't been canceled yet, but you just search for Yeast Radio on any podcatcher and you can find
Yeast Radio. Okay. Well, Madge Weinstein, the Bloated Lesbian, thank you.
Thank you, Max. You and Stacy have always been such wonderful supporters of my work, probably more than anybody. And I love what you guys do. And I think I view that we're all just a big team. Free speech is the way to go. We may not agree on ideas, but we agree that everybody has the right to speak and have their ideas heard.
Right on, sister.
Got it?
Yeah.
Right. I really like that profound wisdom of basically any CEO wearing high-waisted jeans. Like you can't trust them, right?
Now look, high-waisted pants. Yeah, the only person I can think of who looks good in high-waisted pants is Katharine Hepburn.
Katharine Hepburn, or basically 18, 19, 20-year-old supermodels. That's the problem, is like a Hailey Bieber wears a high-waisted jeans.
Also in the Beverly Hillbillies, the woman in that, not Jethro, but his sister.
Not the woman in that, not Jethro. Jethro was an
brother.
old dude.
Yeah, she they couldn't afford proper jeans, so she had to pull them up tight. I remember that distinctly.
Little Max Keiser had a lot of fantasies about older women.
Yeah, because
that
I
he
was
wa-
little. I mean,
he
you know,
watched on
that's his son
television?
choice. You can't move, can't go lower. You're already 4 years old. You can't go to 2. You got to shoot higher, right?
Max,
Ellie Mae was her name on the Beverly Hillbillies. She had like a rope tied around her jeans, tied up. I mean, she was hot. Let's face it. Not as hot as I Dream of Jeannie.
No,
Okay,
well,
that's,
no,
with her
no.
harem pants. I mean, what the Jesus? I'm
No.
only a child. Why are you exposing my eyes to this?
Speaking of bloated lesbians, Max's biggest crush when he was little was a not bloated lesbian, like the opposite, but Jodie Foster, right? When she was the Coppertone baby.
Oh, the Coppertone girl
You were only 4.
because she had her dog tie, and that was the image. Was the dog was pulling at her bathing suit, her bikini, right?
Yeah,
the bottom,
the
the
bottom.
bottoms of her bikini, and the dog, you know, it pulls this down. And I was totally transfixed by this image, and it really,
But
I didn't
Mason-
understand why it was like doing to me what it was doing to me. I didn't understand yet what that was all about, but I remember just staring at it like I'm so mesmerized.
How old are
by
you?
this.
Like 4 or 5?
Yeah, like definitely 4 or 5 years old, and you're just like, you know, there's something about it. I can't quite place it because, but it was, it did stick in my mind.
Yeah, at 4 or 5, you don't quite understand like why. Like I like this boy named Michael who was Greek American. His mother was from Greece, and she used to make spanakopita for me.
Yeah.
And he had a brother named Timmy, and they stole the wheels off my ketchup bottle. My sister and I, we had 2 ketchup bottles and a mustard bottle. Like,
Oh, right.
these
Big
li-
wheels?
Yeah, like big wheels. And they stole the wheels off there. But I had a crush on him. I didn't realize it. But now looking back on it, I realized I had a crush on
No, well,
him.
so did he had a crush on you, and that's, he couldn't express himself, so he stole the wheels off your ketchup bottle big wheel.
Well, he and his brother made their own goat carts, basically. So
Oh,
that's why
right.
they stole the wheels. There was a reason for it. Like, I understand now. Like,
Oh, he's a
looking back.
thug. Jesus.
Yeah, we lived in Queens. So, you know, there still is a big Greek community there because, you know,
Yeah.
there was basically a dictatorship then in Greece back then, and they all fled and they were living in Queens.
Right. They all own coffee shops in Manhattan.
They own a lot of shops.
The
but-
diners, Greek diners. This is, you know, an institution in Manhattan. And then they got kind of yuppified and gentrified. But now COVID-19, I suppose that within 5 years, all the coffee shops and diners in New York will be back being owned by immigrant Greeks.
Well, I'm not sure there are too many new immigrant Greeks
There
anymore.
will be now
These-
because the city will be wiped out. Rents will crash down 95%. It'll be an immigrant enclave again, and artists. Soho will go back to artists, and all the gentrification will be destroyed.
Right. So
They're going to reopen CBGBs, and we're going to have a punk band. Max and Stacy.
Ma-
We already thought of a great name for a punk band. The
fake Ayatollahs.
fake Ayatollahs.
Oh, well, we'll get into that actually in the next episode with Michael Krieger because I have a really interesting story about the fake Ayatollahs. And, you know, in terms of that story to finish up and wrap up and go on to the next segment that we want to show you from Abe Cambridge. Remember, we always like to end on the positive. And I know we had a very long interview with Robert Breedlove and it was so amazing. So you're not complaining, but I want to keep this under 2 hours. And the point is that when I was I was the same age as Max with the Coppertone baby. Well, you know, I was like 4 years old and those neighbors, you know, you lived on those brownstones, the duplex sort of brownstones, and they lived below us in Queens. And I remember being 4 and going downstairs on my own. I don't know where my mom was. Maybe she sent me down there. And I would knock on the door, and to me, it looked like this huge fat lady, Greek lady. I'd be like, "Hey, do you have any spanakopita?"
Yeah.
And she would always like waddle back in the house and go get some spanakopita and then bring it to me. But I remember going downstairs to ask for a spanakopita.
The Greek desserts are fantastic. The baklava.
It's not even a dessert. It's just like spanakopita is spinach
So
and the cheese.
spanakopita is that spinach pie.
Yeah, spinach
Yeah,
pie.
Really nice. I'm just saying they also have nice desserts.
Oh yeah,
like
yeah.
baklava.
But
Remember when we were in Athens and we had those luscious tomatoes?
it was the best ever. It was the best ever. But you know what? We're going to go into
What?
a conversation about, a lot of people ask, and this is a big debate. And I actually, we want to watch that Michael Moore documentary because there's a debate going on in the whole green side of things and environmentalism about, you know, how to wean ourselves off this carbon, and should we do nuclear, solar, renewables? Like, what are the costs? Because there's a cost to everything we do, right? That's the nature of nature, right? There's a supply side and there's a liability and there's an asset. Like you convert things from energy into matter, matter into energy, and back and forth, right? So what are the costs? And here Abe Cambridge goes into the cost of nuclear, because a lot of people ask about that.
There is no spoon. So I spoke recently around comparing solar energy to coal and oil, i.e. solar energy to fossil fuels. We've had some comments about how does it compare to nuclear energy? What is the true cost of nuclear compared to solar power? Well, I'm going to tell you. The thing that you've got to really look at is the levelized cost of energy, which is called LCOE, levelized cost of energy, because that actually takes into account all the costs from construction to fuel to operation and decommissioning of your energy facility. Now, a solar energy facility on a utility scale, to date, you can generate about $2 a megawatt hour of electricity costs. Now, even with storage systems, this is large-scale utility batteries now to allow your solar energy to produce on demand, that's now $15 a megawatt hour. So you're now looking at about $17 a megawatt hour for the total lifetime costs of generating solar. Now, what about nuclear? Well, according to the Bloomberg New Energy Finance report, the levelized cost of nuclear energy now is $120 per megawatt hour. So that's $40 a megawatt hour for solar and storage and $120 a megawatt hour for nuclear power. Now that $120 a megawatt hour figure, that does not take into account the cost of a nuclear accident cleanup. Now the Fukushima disaster alone, the cleanup for that, the price tag is now currently at $600 billion and rising. The accident still hasn't even been fully addressed. And more to the point, the economists that predict these LCOEs, they do apply a discount rate, i.e. reverse interest. Now, a nuclear power plant with a 50-year lifespan, the cost of decommissioning that 50 years into the future at today's money discounted looks very, very minimal. But we are basically forcing future generations to take on astronomical costs to clean up these nuclear power plants. Now, what happens in the future if the world economy is not in a position to fund such a thing? We're literally going to have to let nuclear power plants melt down. Now, that's going to be a catastrophic thing for the planet and humanity. So let's not let that happen, and let's go into solar and wind. And as the same Bloomberg New Energy Finance report indicates, over 2/3 of the world's population would now find wind and solar more cost effective than any other form of energy. So I'll see you in the future, which is today.
Abe Cambridge, our favorite person. I love the content he provides. He always has a good delivery and interesting concept. And obviously, as he always points out, you know, the sun is nuclear, right? That's solar is harnessing nuclear energy already. But like it's far away, and one day that star will explode and it'll get big and like swallow the Earth. But until now, we're not yet getting hit by that nuclear explosion. So one thing that Abe always talks about is that nuclear energy is kind of like central banks. You rely on central banks because there are, it requires huge amount of centralization. Same with the gold standard, right? They're so heavy and so expensive to transport gold, right? So it's centralized. It ends up being centralized because that's a natural way for something so heavy. And of course, with nuclear energy, it's very heavy, and you're smashing dense particles together to create this, energy, a nuclear explosion that you have to harness and try to control. But of course, when it goes wrong, as we see in Japan, what happened with Fukushima, what happened in the Soviet Union when we saw the blow up of Chernobyl, like, it's uninhabitable. There are some people that do live near Chernobyl, and I think it was Louis Theroux who did a documentary and went there. Remember that? And these old babushkas who live there and they grow lettuce. And he went there with this whole white, hazmat suit on, and he was doing a nuclear test, radiation test on their cabbage they were eating.
No, yeah, the cabbage is bigger than the house. It's
yeah,
incredible.
And it was like,
Yeah.
And they were just eating it. But, you know, I mean, they're like, I mean, they looked 80 or something, but maybe they were
20.
only 30 or 40.
Yeah.
Now, these women could wear high-waisted pants. This is
Totally. Keep all those atoms in.
But so, you know, when that sort of situation happens, it does happen. And now, I mean, some people are talking about, oh, we have to go smaller, like smaller nuclear power
Speaking
plants.
of Fukushima nuclear energy, they've just put out a press release saying they're going to release all of the toxic water that's been quote unquote treated back into the Pacific.
Yeah.
Sure. Good idea.
Well,
Thanks.
this is the big problem with nuclear is how to get rid of it, right?
Yeah.
In America, we're going to bring it to Yucca Mountain, sacred Native American land, right? They have no choice in the matter. They're just going to have it dumped there. In France, you know, which has a huge amount of nuclear power, I think it provides something like 85% of their energy. They still don't know how to get rid of the stuff.
Plus, it's cooled by the rivers, and the rivers are drying out due to global warming. So
And they're
gonna
getting
have
warmer,
trouble with
yeah.
that. Yeah.
So you use the river water to cool it down, and that increases the temperature of the water, which causes death, basically, further down the line. But they're going to bury it. I think they did find like a stable. You have to bury it underground. You have to find very stable, no geographical.
Right. As
sort
Gabe
of-
Cranbridge says, there's a nuclear reactor called the sun.
Yeah,
and you can
exactly.
harness it with a solar panel at almost no cost and turn that into Bitcoin. So let's forget about nuclear because it's stupid.
But it's obviously centralized, right? We all agree on that. Like it has to be centralized because of the dangerous nature of it as well. So it could be targeted by bad guys. It could be targeted by your enemies.
Single point of failure.
Targeted by, you know, I lived near a nuclear power plant when I went to high school near one. And, you know, there are like drills every once in a while because apparently if there's a nuclear meltdown, you just like hide under your desk sort of thing, right? Like just to comfort you that you're going to die. But, and remember when we were in Niantic, so that's in Niantic, and we went out to the bay, and it like they do these weird propaganda posters along the river, along the bay, and it says, you know, there used to be Niantic people here, the Native Americans, but they disappeared.
We don't know how, but they disappeared.
Just gone. Just left one day. They decided to leave. Right. We know about some of the massacres, but then they're saying like in the 1980s, you know, late 1970s, early 80s, this nuclear power plant, I forget the name of it right now, but it was built right there in, I think, Groton, Connecticut. And like now the scallops and oysters that used to flourish in this area, they're gone. We don't know why. And you're like, okay.
Right. There's two plaques, right? The one was like, this used to be teeming with oysters and mollusks back in the 70s, and then they mysteriously disappeared. There's another plaque that says around the 70s. Back in the 1970s, this nuclear power plant was built, and it's given power to the local people, right? So these two no one's ever figured out the connection between these two plaques yet. There's still a mystery here. Why did the wildlife die? We don't know.
It tells a powerful story in itself. And as I've told you, that's what you're taught in Hollywood, how to tell a great story visually is juxtaposing two images. So you just juxtapose it. Here, this bay used to be teeming with oysters and mollusks. Now there's that nuclear power plant. Somehow those two went together and one of them collapsed. And then, so that's the message, is that the nuclear power plant is the sun. It's right there. You just have to figure out how to harness it. Use our ingenuity or brain matter or pineal gland or creativity.
Nuclear costs 4 times more than solar.
Yeah. Yeah, because the sun is free. And so finally, you know what? I want to also say decentralization. You know, we talked about the treasuries. Everybody talks about the king sailor. But to me, the true heroes of Bitcoin are the core devs, right? We have these Bitcoin core devs that all of us need. And just like the sun, they provide free work, free energy to us. They sustain the network through their free labor working on Bitcoin Core. And there is a website you can go to, Bitcoin Dev, DEV, list, LIST.com. Hopefully I remembered to put it on the screen right here. telling you how to find it, bitcoindevlist.com. And, you can contribute back. You might be one of these multimillionaires that, Max and Stacy have, because we told you about Bitcoin at $1, like, and you bought 10 and now you have a couple $1,000 worth of, $100,000 to your name, or then you might have bought 1,000 or 2,000. Like, give back to the system, like keep it flowing, the yin and yang, the circle of life, the flow of energy. I don't know. I
always give money every week to Peter Todd. Does he still work on the core? Or is that maybe it's not sending it the right place?
I think you're being scammed.
Place?
I think you're being scammed.
What? I'm not.
I think Luke Dasher, works tirelessly. He's
true, yeah.
But this whole list, there's a list of really interesting people what I'm telling you about here, bitcoindevlist.com. Peter Todd works on a load of shitcoins and other stuff too.
What?
But yes. So here is just Bitcoin workers. They're Bitcoin core workers. They don't work on anything else. They might have a day job in order to support themselves, because what they're doing on Bitcoin core is for free unless you contribute to them. And you can go look at the stuff that you personally are interested in that they're working on. They're each working on different elements of Bitcoin core. This past week, of course, we had the merge into Bitcoin of Schnorr. So this is going to increase privacy. This is going to enable, more second layer stuff and smart contracts and stuff like that people might like. So, these are the guys they're the heroes of the Bitcoin space. Yes.
Critical workers.
Yes. They're the essential workers.
They're the essential workers.
Yes. Bitcoin can survive without Michael Saylor and all these other big companies putting their treasuries into Bitcoin. But Bitcoin needs these Bitcoin core devs to survive.
What about Amir Taki?
No, Max is still like the stock 10 years ago. Like, as you can see, like he's genuinely ready for an old folks home. And fortunately,
where's Amir? Get Amir on the phone. I got to talk to him.
Fortunately, the sunexchange.com/orange pill is working on a retirement community in South Africa, and maybe Max might have a place there so that he can,
I
stay
still got
back
coins on Amir's exchange. What was it called? Indisco or
Intersango?
Intersango. I still got coins on that exchange somewhere.
Okay, well, before this all goes horribly wrong, I think we should end it now. And remember, just also a site, the website for contributing to the Bitcoin dev community, and it could be like $10. If you only have $10, contribute $10.
$10.
And that's bitcoindevlist.com. Also, go visit.
$10 buys you a comma on a line of code on Bitcoin Core Dev.
Exactly. Whatever. Every single comma, every single period, every single 0 and 1 contributes to the code, and that's important. It doesn't matter how small it is, it all contributes to it. And MexicanCryptoArt.com, MexicoCryptoArt.wordpress.com. That's where you can go and support this 10-year-old artist from Mexico. And obviously this is sort of Day of the Dead sort of look to it. And of course, that brings it back to me, because that photo was taken on Omaha Beach in France. And that is in Normandy. And we went there because my grandfather got a Silver Star, one of the highest medals you can ever receive in the U.S. Army. He got a Silver Star right there on Omaha Beach. And so the Day of the Dead, like the whole feeding the death and life cycle is important to keep on contributing, and life will give you back to you.
The universe provides. Well, I guess that's it. Thanks for being here, and we'll be back next week. Same time, same place. Margs, Sats, and how does it go?
Sats, Margs, and Orange Pill.
Sats, Margs, and Orange Pill. The new sex, drugs, and rock and roll with Max and Stacy. And I've got an idea I want to do later. It involves a bikini, but we'll talk about that later.
Okay, do this.
Oh, yeah, peace. Peace, peace, peace. Look at that. Orange Pill Podcast.